Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear viewers, ladies and gentlemen. This is your host Salahuddin Choudhry in the YouTube channel Penta-S, the segment Sal Soul, session 10. Today, as many of you will know, is a day which is an international day of the victims of enforced disappearances. Today is 30th of August, International Day of the Victims of Enforced Disappearances. Very important subject, very difficult subject, and often leading to a lot of tragedies. I have today for you a talk or a narrative entitled Enforced Disappearance is a Painful Crime. Painful, mind you, yet it is a crime. So, this is where I begin, dear viewers. A man is known by his existence on the planet. One human being is known by the other as they exist or live with each other. This is the very foundation of coexistence. One coexists with another by way of respect shown and practiced. Togetherness is indeed the bondage. What if that bondage gets afflicted and togetherness gets broken? Then one person in the bondage of respect, trust, and love is seen no more. The other person in that relationship falls in despair and worries why he is missing. He consults the family and others in the neighborhood why his comrade has out of the blue disappeared. Discovers to his horror the friend has been taken away by force. My God, taken away by force. What a tragedy, particularly for his family and for those who get to know about it. This is what we call enforced disappearance. And it is painful. It is a crime, a big crime, and shameful. Regretfully, this is a world phenomenon. This is a world phenomenon. This happens almost everywhere. Happening in many countries for a long time, since long. Both the economic hardships and the devastation of losing a loved one may cause relatives of the disappeared great emotional trauma. That can lead not only to the violation of the right to family life, but also to give negative physical and psychological impacts. International human rights law strictly prohibits enforced disappearances, which are a cause of great suffering for family members. The detention of an individual in which the state denies holding the person or refuses to provide information on their fate of whereabouts. To mark the International Day of the Victims of Enforced Disappearances on the 30th of August, as I said earlier, the UN Committee, the United Nations Committee on Enforced Disappearances, and the working group on the same subject, but it's called Enforced or Involuntary Disappearance, issued a statement which reads, and I quote, "Enforced disappearance, by its nature, is a complex crime that violates all ranges of rights, including economic, social, and cultural rights of the disappeared, their relatives, and the others." In the official UN report of 2009, of the 82 countries where the cases of missing persons were identified, the largest numbers in several thousands were Iraq, and I can quote the number, 16,500, my God, very big number. Sri Lanka, 12,300. Others are comparatively lower, like in Argentina, Guatemala, Peru, Algeria, El Salvador, and Colombia. The lack of effective protection of economic, social, and cultural rights is the main contributing factor to enforced disappearances, my dear viewers. People living in poverty are more vulnerable and exposed to higher risk of enforced disappearance. In some instances, when encountering the criminal justice system, they are deprived of legal advice and assistance to challenge the conditions of their arrest, trial, conviction, and detention, and thus disappear within the system. What a shame, what a tragedy, how horrifying. Children who lack access to education. Children who lack access to education live in poverty or in street situation or have been exploitation, have been displaced, face greater risk of being abducted to turn into child soldiers or trafficked for the purpose of exploitation, like I was saying earlier. Migrants and persons with disability are also particularly vulnerable to enforced disappearance due to the lack of financial resources, protection schemes, as well as political, social, and cultural participation. Enforced disappearance as a tool of intimidation, reprisal, and unlawful punishment against human rights defenders, including individuals who promote economic, social, and cultural rights. Now, about Pakistan. The term missing persons is sometimes used as a euphemism, according to a human rights activist of Defense of Human Rights Pakistan, an NGO, a non-profitable NGO. There are more than 7,000 reported cases of forced disappearance in Pakistan since 2011. What a pity. It's a big number, very big number. Interestingly, the Islamabad High Court once called enforced disappearances as the most heinous crime and intolerable. The court system, our courts, Superior Court, said enforced disappearances are like the most heinous crime and are intolerable. That's it. This, indeed, and unfortunately, have long been a stain on Pakistan's human rights record. Despite the pledges of successive governments to criminalize the practice, there has been slow movement, regrettable, slow movement on legislation, while people, including those from the media, continue to be forcibly disappeared with impunity. Regrettably again, in Pakistan, state authorities, including law enforcement agencies and the criminal justice system, have somehow fallen short in demonstrating the political will to end the enforced disappearances. Sadly, the government machinery, despite promises to the victims' families, has yet to strategize on ending this illegal practice, both in taking action on pending cases and investigating and prosecuting those responsible to prevent disappearances. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm saying all this not from my own. I have gone through many research papers and I've got quotations which I'm not quoting everywhere, but this is the sum total. And I hope this does not happen for too long a time. However, to continue the research paper and somewhat as per things that happened in our country, in January 2019, Ministry of Human Rights submitted a draft bill to the Ministry of Law and Justice to criminalize enforced disappearance, though through an amendment in the Pakistan Penal Code. That ministry stated that the government wanted to sign the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. This was a very important step just about 2 years ago. Now this year, 2021, has witnessed renewed efforts. Luckily, and with all the blessings, witnessed renewed efforts by families of victims of enforced disappearance for the release of their dear and near ones. These efforts resulted in assurance by the Human Rights Ministry promising a new law against the crime of enforced disappearance and assuring them of the government's support in locating the whereabouts of their missing family members. Very reassuring, a very good step taken by the government. Now, Pakistan needs to find a permanent solution. I'm sure, ladies and gentlemen, you'll all agree without doubt. Pakistan needs to find a permanent solution to the issue and bring an end to the ordeal of thousands of families waiting to see their loved ones reunite. I hope this becomes a blessing and this does happen. Now a word about collective prevention. Every ill, every disease, every way of malice or things that happen in life, there's always a protective arrangement. So I'll tell you about collective prevention. The International Committee of Red Cross, ICRC, works to prevent and address enforced disappearance as part of its engagement on missing persons. This is an integral part of its mandate and of its Central Tracing Agency, CTA, which is at the heart of efforts to protect and restore family links, search for missing persons, and protect the dignity of the dead. This is very important. Even if somebody is dead, gone, but the dignity remains. That dignity must be given, which we as human society owe to them. The ICRC takes a comprehensive approach to prevent persons from going missing, restore and maintain family links, clarify the fate and whereabouts of the missing, address the needs of the families and support authorities and other actors. It brings together protection, forensic, legal, mental health, and psycho-social support services, putting those affected at the center. For instance, when states take measures to find the missing, whether it is within a criminal investigation or outside of it, the ICRC provides technical advice and recommends that such processes correctly address the myriad rights and needs of families, which again are very, very important, needs of families. So, an effective and comprehensive response to the tragedy of those forcibly disappeared other missing persons and their families is a complex endeavor that goes beyond the capacity and mandate of any one actor. The initiatives and the other efforts of many actors with different roles, approaches of expertise are the key. The initiatives and the efforts of many actors with different roles, approaches, and areas of expertise are the key. The ICRC is part of these efforts, and it takes to ensure, or rather it seeks to ensure, that its engagement is complementary to that of other actors. For instance, its Missing Persons Project, ICRC's Missing Persons Project, has created a global community of practitioners bringing together stakeholders and families of the missing, including those forcibly disappeared. By force, those have been disappeared. Many actors play a key role in preventing people from going missing, searching for those who do, bringing those responsible to justice, and responding to the needs of families. This includes efforts to ensure that the specific obligations on enforced disappearance are respected. Mind you, they have to be respected. Otherwise, things will not happen the way we would like them to happen. Now, civil society actors, including family associations such as the mothers and grandmothers, are important. Mothers and grandmothers are key stakeholders and advocate in raising awareness on victims of enforced disappearance and other missing persons, clarifying their fate and bringing those responsible to justice. Many states have adopted measures at domestic level to define new processes or improve existing ones on missing persons, like, for example, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru. Some on the enforced disappearance specifically, including due to the efforts of families and organizations. International regional actors also play a pivotal role, particularly from an accountability perspective. International and regional human rights courts and tribunals, including the European Court of Human Rights and the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, have greatly contributed to clarifying and further developing normative principles. Under the Statute of International Criminal Court, enforced disappearance constitutes a crime against humanity. A crime against humanity. Disappearance. It is defined or regarded as a crime against humanity when committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack against any civilian population with knowledge of the attack. So that's it. I would like to repeat it. It's very important. Under the statute of the International Criminal Court, enforced disappearance constitutes a crime against humanity when committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack against civilian population with knowledge of the attack. Ladies and gentlemen, my dear viewers, Human Rights Treaty, now I'm talking about the treaty, Human Rights Treaty bodies and Human Rights Council special procedures also play a key normative and advocacy role on enforced disappearance. Importantly, the relevant committee, CED, and the Working Group on Enforced or Involuntary Disappearances, WGEID, through complementary roles and functions, support states in their fight. Efforts continue, but need to be redoubled. They have to be, they have to be in greater numbers, greater size, efforts to raise awareness of obligations relating to enforced disappearance and other missing persons, and to foster sustained political commitment, both nationally and internationally, to ensure compliance with the law. UNGA resolutions, United Nations General Assembly resolutions, especially number 2474 on missing persons, are important tools to raise awareness and leverage support, including for the work of human rights mechanisms and other civil society actors. The resolution encourages relevant UNSG special representatives to consider this issue when implementing their mandates, including in bilateral discussions with the states. 2474 also calls upon members states to cooperate with different actors, including international organizations, on this particular question. My dear viewers, it is essential that all states pay specific attention to the multidimensional impact of enforced disappearances on the economic, social, and cultural rights of the victims throughout the search process and the investigation. In cases involving indigenous peoples, mind you, I spoke about indigenous people a few days back on a special day. In cases involving indigenous peoples or other ethnic or cultural groups, there is a need to consider and respect specific cultural patterns when dealing with the disappearance or death of a member of the community. Here, another important element. The COVID-19 pandemic, as is current, has clearly had a devastating impact on the enjoyment of economic, social, and cultural rights in all parts of the world, and has exacerbated the impact on victims of enforced disappearances and their relatives. On the occasion of International Day commemorating the victims of acts of violence based on religion or belief. Now, this is another angle, another matter. The faith-related matter. Religion and beliefs, the faith. UN experts call on all societies to collectively reject hate and exclusion. Quote unquote, hate is the trend, is the going word. Hate and exclusivity, another unfortunate phrase. And for an end, they all try for an end to impunity for violent acts driven by religion or belief. As per their statement, the 22nd August International Day commemorate the victims of acts of violence based on religion or belief. The world has faced an alarming escalation of hate both online and offline, targeting religion or belief minorities as well as members of lesbian, gay, transsexual and intersex communities. Again, very unfortunate. Very, very unfortunate. This is happening. Women and girls are disproportionately impacted in very specific ways that are often sexualized, with serious implications for their physical and mental health, livelihood, participation in public life, safety and survival. Women and girls. These days, we are facing so many issues on this particular subject. Violence against women, the rights of the women and the girls, their community. It's very, very important. Targeted acts of violence have led to a pervasive environment of fear for many women and girls around the world, not just Pakistan, in the whole world. We humanity, we the human race, have to be taking this matter up as seriously as possible and as soon as possible for a result-oriented outcome. It is shocking that even today, in many parts of the world, the rights of people to freely adopt and peacefully practice their religion or belief continue to be framed as national security threats. Anti-blasphemy laws are used to suppress dissent, and racist, misogynistic, and homophobic laws, policies, or discourses are used to stigmatize and dehumanize individuals and groups. Very sad, very unfortunate. These practices enable and legitimize appalling abuses and crimes committed by state and non-state actors, such as extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances, torture, and sexual and gender-based violence, as well as arbitrary detentions and discrimination in education, employment, and participation in public and cultural life. So, my dear viewers, in conclusion for my talk, I reiterate, I emphasize, underscore, states and nations ought to fulfill their obligations. States and nations ought to fulfill their obligation to prevent enforced disappearance, to search for the victims, and to investigate, prosecute, and punish the perpetrators. Very important. We've got to do it. This is what I reiterate, re-emphasize. It is my concluding words. Of course, I'll go on for another couple of lines. And here, ladies and gentlemen, I quote the UNSG, the United Nations Secretary General, quote unquote, under international human rights law, families and societies have a right to know the truth about what happened. They all have the right to know about what happened in regard to disappearance. I ask member countries to fulfill this responsibility. On this International Day, I call on all states to ratify the convention and to work with the United Nations Committee and Working Group on Enforced Disappearances in helping tackle this cowardice practice, this cowardly practice, which the visible will, this must be seen, the visible will and commitment of those with the power to do so.